With a showbiz career that has spanned more than 50 years, she made her mark in the 50s on The Donna Reed Show, in the 60s co-starring with Elvis on the big screen, in the 70s as a member of the cast of Mary Hartman, Mary Hartman, and in the 80s and 90s on the TV sitcoms One Day at a Time and Coach. But her life has not been without its challenges. She received a life-saving liver transplant in the fall of 2000 and has worked tirelessly for the Alzheimer's Association following her mother's battle with this dreaded disease. Hello, I'm Ernie Manouse. Coming up on InnerVIEWS, our conversation with Emmy-nominated actor Shelley Fabares. How does your outlook change when you find out that you could be facing death?
I would say that it changes almost completely. I had a liver transplant and was, at one particular point, before I had the transplant, I was very close to death. And I do remember thinking, gosh, maybe this is it. And I just, it seems so inconsequential. Something that seems so consequential all the rest of the time suddenly just seemed, I thought, like, is this, I can't believe this is going to be it. But then after all the things happen and the transplant takes place in my particular case, part of it sounds not corny, but it's been used so many times, but it is true. Your priorities do shift. You really do get a sense of what's really important and what's really important to you. You know, it's not always the same for everybody, but everybody always thinks of, family and friends and da-da-da-da-da, all of which is true, but there are some different things. But that, for me, it wasn't that it was so much a different thing, because that's sort of how I've operated my life anyway, but it really brought home the fragility of life and how fast everything can change and how extraordinarily lucky we are to be alive and to have this opportunity to be here, and in my case, to get an entire second chance. It does make things more precious, and I do find I've always been a worrier all my entire life, and my mother used to say to me that if I didn't have something to worry about, I would sit there and worry until I thought of something, and then I would worry about that. And it's really is true. And I have found that I don't worry much anymore. I still get nervous about some things and stuff, but I don't really worry. It all seems, the things that seem so important aren't. So it's kind of like, no, our time here is so limited, it's so finite, that why waste it being nervous or anxious, worrying about something? Just, what is. So,
were you surprised by your reaction to it?
Yes, I was. The whole process was really interesting, because I was sick for a number of years when they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, for actually over 6 years, almost 7 years, and I didn't get it that I was on the road to dying, in the early part, but later on. It was once I found out that I had to have a transplant, and I had had an episode just before that did almost kill me. And they said, "Now you have to have a transplant. If you don't, if you have this experience again, we can't save you." And it's something that happens in this area, the esophagus. And they said sometimes this can happen in the stomach, and if that happens, it's not even a question of saving you. Nobody knows that it's happening, and then you're just suddenly dead. So that, and then going into the transplant itself, you're made very aware that more than half the people waiting for a transplant don't live long enough to get the transplant, and certainly some people are lost during this process, and it can be rejected and all those things. But once I found out that that's what we had to do, I'm a very practical person, always have been, very little obsessive compulsive, but very, but very practical. And it was kind of like, okay, this is what we have to do, And I didn't entertain any thoughts. It wasn't that I was going, I can't think of dying. It wasn't that. I just didn't. People said, did you think you were going to die? Did that ever cross your mind? You would have to be an idiot not to have that cross your mind. They tell you kind of every step along the way that, this could be it. But it just didn't faze me. And I found after the transplant, the first couple of years were so difficult in terms of recovering that all of my energy, of which there was little, but all of the energy that I had went into the healing process. And then about 2.5 years, almost 3 years out from the operation, my recovery took a long time, I suddenly started to get so depressed. And then I got more depressed because I was depressed. I thought, how outrageous to be depressed when you've been given this glorious second chance. And but as it was explained to me, that's when I actually started letting in everything that had happened. I wasn't in denial about stuff. I mean, I knew it was going on, but now the emotions were starting to click in, and it took me a while to get through that. But yeah, it was just delayed a little bit.
Do you fear death less now, after having gone through it?
I do fear death less, and I'm somebody who has lived. Probably the earliest memory I have is of, I'm going to die soon. I mean,
really?
From the time I was a little girl, yes, I was always going to die. The main thing I was going to die from has always been cancer. And, where did I get the information? I mean, I was really little. I don't know. But I had it, and I just was, I had the information, and that's just how I was sure. It's kind of when I turned 45 or 50, and I kind of went, well, gee, I'm basically almost old now, so I guess I've lived longer than I thought I was going to. But I did have an experience, I'll just do it very briefly, when I was working on Coach, when I was sick. And it was sort of an out-of-body experience. And in my way of thinking, I think that that I was in the process of leaving. It's very hard to explain, but when I realized what was happening, or what I believe was happening, I thought, oh my gosh, if I had only known, it's actually so beautiful. It was beyond peaceful. It was beyond a feeling of love. It was what I have since, and I guess before that too, heard people describe as this all-encompassing kind of feeling of love. And I didn't see a light. I wasn't going toward a light, but I clearly was leaving. And I just specifically remember thinking, if I had only known that it was this nice. I spent all of those years being so, like on a daily basis, frightened about it. And the two things that made me sad really were, I kept thinking, I feel so bad, because I was in the green room on our set of Coach, and I thought, this is going to be so terrible for whoever walks here and finds me gone. And I thought, I feel so bad. And then I, thought about my husband, and I was just thinking, I wish I could, say thank you, and I love him one more time, But other than that, it was enveloped in this beautiful peace and light and gentleness. Yeah. So yeah, I left to my own devices, I can still conjure up a good case of worry about death. But I really, that feeling was so tactile to me. I can still feel it. I can just think about it and go right back there again. And so it has taken away, I think, a lot of the fear. And also, when you get that close to death and you don't die, you go, okay, I did survive that. Maybe I can survive something else. Yeah. So it's an amazing experience.
Okay, changing gears altogether.
Yes.
I've heard you say often that there's two questions people always want to know, and so got to get those out of the way.
Okay.
We'll start off with the hair.
Okay. Here's the story about my hair. When I was sick for a number of years, actually from like 94 on, but they couldn't find out. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. They knew it had something to do with my liver, but couldn't find it. And I held my own for quite a while, but I was, going downhill. And it had finally come to the time where they had said, you have to have a transplant. So my husband and I both wore the
pagers.
beepers, the pagers, that that only that place has the number of. Forgetting about the people who will call that number by mistake. The first 7 times it happened, I said to my husband, we've got to figure something out because one of us is going to die of a heart attack.
Yeah, that's what's going to get you.
Exactly. I mean, it was just amazing. Anyway, I occasionally would go and get my hair done, and Mike would drive me, and I was still functional and able, but I just didn't have any strength, and so I would go and get my hair done. And this one day, I saw this lady, beautiful, beautiful woman, and she had very dark hair, very long spikes, all the hot pink color. And I asked him how he did it. I said, because he was his client, and I said, what is that process? And when he finished telling it to me, he said, did you want to do it? And everything sort of stopped for me, and I thought, this is the first time in my life since I was 3 years old, because that's when I started working, that no one can say to me, oh, you can't do that. No, you can't do your hair like that. Or you can't wear that. But more specifically, well, no, you can't do that. And I thought, it was such a hugely, it was almost hard to take in how liberating that was. And I always fear saying this part of it because it does sound melodramatic, because I lived. I got, by the grace of God, I got to live. But at that time, I thought, okay, nobody can tell me I can't do it, and I'm dying. So if not now, when? And so I kind of came back to, everybody started moving again. And I said, yes. And he had already gone on to something else, and he said, yes, what? And I said, yes, I want to do my hair like that. And and I had also remembered a person had given me a book that had a lovely poem in it many years ago. And the idea of the poem is, it's about a very gallant warrior, and it's set in olden times. And there's this one particular part of the poem where they're going out to do battle, and it was referring mostly to this one man. And it said that as he rode out with plume afloat, and then talking about his strength and that always stuck with me. So I also figured, well, if I'm going to die, I'm going out with plume afloat. It's going to be here, and that's it. And if I get to live, it's sort of a kind of full of hell. I'm still here, by God.
Yeah.
So I did it 7 years ago, and I've kept it. A lot of people say to me, "You're not ready to change your hair yet," and I go, "Nope."
Okay, what was your husband's reaction when he first saw it?
He loved it.
Really?
He absolutely loved it. Yeah.
And you married the right man for you.
I did marry the right man. I did indeed. He. It's interesting because my husband is kind of clothes-wise and style-wise is very conservative, and he's a wildly a wild Democrat liberal, just very, very liberal. But in terms of himself, he dresses very conservatively. So I thought, well, this will be interesting to see what he thinks of this. And he loved it from the get-go. And in fact, when it starts to fade out a little bit, he says, well, you're going to have it done again soon, aren't you? Yes, I am.
Okay, the other question
Yes.
people always want to know about, Elvis.
Elvis. Everybody always asks about Elvis, yes. He was a wonderful man. I truly loved him. We had a lovely relationship. Because I did 3 movies with him, it spread out over a number of years. And you know how you meet some people, and right away when you meet them, you kind of go, hello, and you just connect.
Right.
You don't know what it is, you just connect. And that happened for the two of us. It was odd. It was not a romantic thing. I had, in fact, just gotten married, my first marriage, about 17 days before that.
Oh, wow.
And so, so I was an exuberant bride. I was so, like kids used to do in school, Mrs. So-and-so and so. I was still in that phase, writing that all the time. But he and I just sort of connected, and we just, and it just grew from there. And he he was just a very sweet. He was the good Southern boy. Everything, all of those Southern manners, yes ma'am, no sir, thank you ma'am, etc. All of those things were really such an integral part of him. It didn't have any sense of somebody trying to do that or to remember to do that. It's just clearly part and parcel of who he was. And he had a darling sense of humor. He and his guys that were with him, they loved to play practical jokes on people. They had, like water balloons and stuff like that. They loved those kinds of things. And I have actually the favorite picture I have of the two of us is one. It was taken at the end of it was the last scene in a movie called Clam Bake, the last one we did together. And in this scene, Elvis. Well, as I've said a lot of times, the movies were always the same. He was a race car driver or a ski instructor, and we were always in Florida. And it was, but this particular one, he was a race car driver, and he coming down to Florida for the summer vacation, for spring vacation. He was incredibly rich. I mean, just rich, family money, and. On the way down to Florida, he stops in at this gas station, and I don't know if you remember a lovely actor by the name of Will Hutchins. He played Sugarfoot on television many years ago, and he worked as the gas man there, and they decide to switch places because Elvis has a job to be the ski instructor. Oh no, Will has the job to be the ski instructor. So they change places, and Will is of course delighted. He's driving a Maserati. He's doing this. He's doing that, and Elvis shows up just as this guy who's going to give ski lessons. And anyway, so the movie goes on. Actually, some very funny stories with that movie. But the movie goes on, and in the very last scene, obviously, I've fallen hard for him. I had my eye on Bill Bixby because he was supposed to be very rich, so that's who I was going after. But of course, in the meantime, I fell in love with Elvis, and thinking that he had absolutely nothing. So the last scene in the picture, we're driving along. We're actually on a sound stage, with the blue screen in back of us, and excuse me, he's supposed to. We're talking, and he said something about he has a boat. And I said, "You have a boat? Really? You have?" And I don't remember. He said, "Yeah, there it is, right there." And so, you look out, and it's this huge yacht. And I go, "Yeah, right." And we go along a couple of places, and he said, "No, really." He said, we switched places. I'm who this," and she goes, "No." And he finally pulls out his wallet. And he hands it to me, and I'm supposed to open it up and see his driver's license and all of that. Well, he and the boys had, there was a picture that went around years ago of a really gnarled-faced old woman with no teeth, and just her face had sort of collapsed in on itself. Nobody ever knew whether it was an actual photograph or not.
Right.
But it was quite funny. Anyway, so we're doing this scene, and I open it up, and this woman is looking back at me. And this is one of those things that is never as funny when you're retelling it, but at the time you're doing it, it's hysterical. And I laughed so hard, and he was laughing so hard, and the set photographer was there, and he caught the moment, and so you really see me laughing, and I'm clearly hysterical. And they catch him. He's just kind of going to hit the steering wheel because he's laughing so hard. So he's almost a tiny bit out of focus, just a little bit, but he's laughing so hard. It's just clearly a really, just a sweet moment. And it's one of my favorite pictures.
Is it hard when you know someone like that, and then you see all the tabloid stuff, and boy, he was the king of the tabloids too.
Yeah.
How do you
still is.
settle that? Yeah, I know, still. How do you settle that within you?
Well, I think most of it all you have to sort of ignore it. In regards to him, I knew the person that I knew, and I loved him and cared about him and knew him to be a really, really good human being. And I thought it was devastating what happened. Yeah. I really understand how and why it happened. His life was set up in such a strange way, an amazing way. It's much too hard to deal with when you're a 19-year-old boy from Tupelo, Mississippi.
Right.
And I always ache about that. And, as a friend, you always think, this is putting much more importance on myself than is deserved. But it was like, oh, if only I could have said something to him or done something, you know. But so I ache for that. I miss him. I miss him basically every day. I think about him. I have memories of things that we did. We laughed. We laughed so much. It was just, you know, wonderful. And those memories are so alive. And as far as what the tabloids say, you know, they've been proven every so often to be right. They've been proven every so often. This is what they used to do all the time. There would be a tiny kernel, just a kernel of truth in the story, something, right. You know. She had blonde hair, whatever. And so that basically protected them for a lot of years because you couldn't discount the whole story. And then as time has gone on, I think they have widened their sources a lot and seem sometimes to have or have some valid information. You just have to ignore it. Made me mad what they wrote about Elvis. But that's part and parcel of this business. If you're going to be if you choose to be in front of the camera and be there, that's, unless you've been dropped from another planet and just have no idea about anything and you're suddenly starring in something, there's no reason for anybody not to understand. Doesn't mean they have to like it, but there's no way you can't understand what comes with it if you right. achieve stardom or just great celebrity. It doesn't make it easier. It is hard, but yeah. It goes with it.
In addition to your career,
yes.
You do a lot with Alzheimer's. Why is that?
I work with the Alzheimer's Association and have for the past 16 years, I think. My mother had Alzheimer's, and she died with Alzheimer's in 1992. And my sister and I had spent years and years and years trying to find out what was wrong with her. And nobody could tell us. For a long time, just my sister and I knew that there was something off. We just didn't know quite what it was. If this happened today, and I saw what I saw, I would know instantly, what it is. But at that time, I just had no inkling. There were just changes of behavior that, you know, you could... I used to want to say that she would do something, and later on I said, you know, what I wanted to do is like Cher did in Moonstruck, where she went, snap out of it, you know? Yeah. And it's... anyway, she had such a difficult journey with this, and my sister and I were her caregivers, and then ultimately we had to have someone else come in to help us. And I just decided that I had already volunteered my time to the association, not knowing what I could do, if anything. And I just decided that I couldn't do anything to help my mother. You know, I could make sure of the creature comforts, you know, and be with her. But beyond that, I really couldn't do anything. And I thought, well, this is a way that I can. I knew it was too late for her. Whatever was found was not going to help her. But in a way to honor her would be to work with the association, so that hopefully down the line nobody else will ever have to.
Did she realize what was happening to
her? They can't tell you, but yes, I think she did. She had said very early on, she said, if I ever find out I have Alzheimer's, I will kill myself. And I saw writings of hers where she underlined things like 50 times and exclamation points, and it was about appointments and stuff. And I could just see that you could see her mind losing track. And I didn't see this for a long time, but when I saw it, I went, oh my gosh. And then it turns out I had to take over her financial stuff, and which to anybody who knows me goes, oh my God, you know, the family must have been desperate. Yeah. But anyway, I took it over, and my mother had been contributing to the Alzheimer's Association, just little amounts, for years and years and years. Wow. And so I think she did know, and I think she knew going sort of through the journey itself. I think her cognitive awareness of it was dissipating as she was, you know, further into the disease. But I always talk to my mother as though I were talking to you right now, only I let her speak a little bit more. And I've let you speak. And I always did it as if she she was here and she was understanding what I was saying, even if she couldn't talk, answer me back. And, I'll never know, but there was one time when they were, if my mother didn't start eating, they were going to put a feeding tube in. And this was somewhat close to the end. And I went into her and I talked and I said, I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if you can understand me, but I need you to listen to something. I said, if you're ready to go, if you want to go, we're here, we love you, we'll support you, we're with you every step of the way. I said, but if you're not ready to go, you have to start eating because they're going to put a feeding tube in you and it will be just a long da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And talking to her, she was just kind of looking around the room with this the blank stare that people tend to get, the not unfocused look of Alzheimer's patients. And I went out into the hall and did something with one of the nurses and came back in. And she was sitting there eating food. And she hadn't eaten for months.
Wow.
It was so I feel that if she didn't understand it on the level that we're discussing right now, somewhere inside of her, my feeling will always be that she, on some deep level, she understood what was being said. She got it and just could not respond back. I don't know.
And unfortunately, we're already out of time.
Oh my gosh.
That quick. I didn't even get to find out about Johnny Angel or Donna Reed Show. Thank you so much for sitting down and talking
Ernie,
with us.
You're welcome. I'm sorry. I have to learn to talk in shorter sentences. I know that.
Thank you, though.
You're welcome. Pleasure.
Shelley Fabares.
To order a transcript, call 866-652-3378 or send $6.95 to the address on your screen. Please include the name of the guest.